Hey, come see us on tour. We'll be in Duluth, Georgia, Jacksonville, Florida, Los Angeles, Tempe, Arizona, and Burbank, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for those tickets. We have some guests right at the top of the show. This is going to be exciting. Our first guest is Angela McArdle. She is a prominent figure in the Libertarian Party, serving as the chair of the Libertarian National Committee since 2022. In 2018, she ran for the U.S. House seat in California's 34th Congressional District, securing 8.4% of the vote in the primary. She was a co-organizer of the Rage Against the War Machine rally in Washington, D.C., which I was a part of, which is a big success. Please welcome to the show, Angela McArdle. Hey, Angela, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Also, you see next to her is Bret Weinstein. He's a returning guest, friend of the show. He's an American podcaster, author, former professor of evolutionary biology. He served on the faculty of Evergreen State College from 2002 to 2017 when he resigned in the aftermath of a series of campus protests about racial equity at Evergreen, which brought him to national attention. With his wife, Heather Hying, he co-wrote A Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century, and he is the host of the popular Dark Horse podcast, which I'm a big fan of and watch often. Please welcome back to the show, Bret Weinstein. Hey, how are you?
Doing well. Glad to be here, Jimmy.
So the reason why I have both of you on is because, they've organized this big to-do on September 29th in Washington, D.C., the same place we were at doing the Rage Against the War Machine rally. It's called Rescue the Republic. And look at all the cool people that are going to be there. Bret's going to be there. Look at that. Russell Brand will be there, Tulsi Gabbard, Matt Taibbi, Colonel Douglas McGregor is going to be there. Somebody named a band named Skillet. I'm not hip with the kids with the long hair and the new math. Then there's Lara Logan, Dr. Robert Malone. He's been on the show. He's the pioneer. There's Dr. Pierre Corey, who's taking care of me for my vaccine injury. Tennessee Jet. I don't know. I'm out of it. JP Sears, hilarious. We love JP. There is. There's your wife right there. And then 5 Times August is going to be there. I'm familiar with them because of Twitter and that great song they did about COVID. Let's see who else. And then there's me. Look, that's back when I had my dark hair. It's nice.
I like that they picked a nice photo of you, Jimmy.
Yeah, it's a nice photo. And some Deepak, not Chopra, just a different Deepak. And then Struggles Jennings and Zuby. I know Zuby from Twitter. So please tell me what this is about. Please tell to either one of you, take it where you will. What is Rescue the Republic rally all about September 29th in Washington, D.C.?
Take it away, Bret.
Well, we are convinced that this is a pivotal moment in American history, and in fact, that not only is the Republic in great danger, but Western civilization is. And this is the moment at which we have to recover control over our governmental structures and return them to functioning in the way that the founders envisioned. So at one level, this is obviously an event. You could call it a rally, but at another level, I'm hesitant about those terms because they don't really reflect the gravity of the situation. It's a little like calling Woodstock a music festival, which it was, but it was also more than that. It was a defining moment for a generation, and we believe this is going to be a defining moment for ours.
So how is Western civilization, what is the threat to Western civilization in our republic?
Well, the West is based on the idea that we are not allowed to rig the structures of the world in favor of our people, that we agree to a level playing field and the structures that protect it from people gaming. So what has happened is our institutions have all been captured, and the system now has many of the trappings of a democratic republic, but it doesn't function like one. And that is resulting in a never-ending stream of policies that do not serve the public interest, and increasingly threats to the central values that we hold dear.
So what would be some of those central values?
Well, things like informed consent in a medical context, Things like the consent of the governed being the sole basis for the legitimacy of governmental power, a commitment to truth-seeking in which we do not tell ourselves stories that we want to hear, but in fact we pursue the truth that we need to know. We need equal protection under the law. We've seen egregious overreach of lawfare being used against political rivals, being used against dissidents. We need a rational border policy because although immigration can be good, it is not good inherently. And having an open border in which we have no idea who's coming across and what they want and whether they even want to be Americans is very important. There are threats to the family. There's an antinatalism that has taken over our institutions. There is an onerous belief that the state knows better how to raise children than parents do, and that in fact the state has the right to take children from parents and inflict experimental medical treatments on them that have implications across the child's entire life. So that's the beginning of a list for you.
Free speech. That's an important one too.
Yes, I guess I missed that.
Freedom of speech. Well,
Yes.
I agree with you. I think that would be the most important one because without that, you can't get anything correct. And there's been an assault on our speech, especially ramped up during COVID. But now, even I'm going to be interviewing after you. There's a group of black socialists called the Uhuru movement, and they're now being accused by the federal government, and they're taken to court. They could do 10 years for working for the Russian government, and basically they're just using their freedom of speech, and so they're trying to criminalize free speech. Let's go through. You have on your website, it says there are 8 pillars, and let's go through some of them. It says banish state and media control, surveillance, and propaganda versus the censorship industrial complex. So, Angela, you want to go ahead and tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think that anybody who was paying attention over the last 4 years or so understands that the federal government and its extrajudicial agencies, departments, run an aggressive propaganda campaign. And they do it through social media. You know, they co-opted Twitter. We read all about that in the Twitter files. Mark Zuckerberg actually just came out and apologized for what we all knew, but had told that, had not happened, which is that he worked lockstep with the federal government to censor things like the Hunter Biden laptop story and certain things about COVID-19 shots during 2020 and 2021. And, we view that essentially as a censorship industrial complex. And certainly we oppose it. That's one of the things that we want to use this event for, is to speak out against it and identify it. I think it's really critical to identify these things so that people understand what they are and can start to turn away from them.
So it was unfortunate, I think, the timing of Mark Zuckerberg's letter to the House committee. If he would have done it maybe a couple of months earlier, maybe there would be a different outcome in the Missouri versus, was it the Biden administration over censorship? And correct me if I'm wrong, did the court rule that they didn't have standing? Was that what it was? They didn't actually address whether the Biden administration and the federal government was in coercing people to censor, but they didn't. Did they say they didn't have standing to sue?
Yes, that is correct. It was argued that because they could not prove that what the executive branch had attempted to do had actually changed the behavior of the platforms, that they did not have standing because they couldn't prove that they were harmed, which to many of us looks like an absurd rationale. But nonetheless, that was what the court said.
Well, there definitely is a censorship industrial complex, and I've run into it several times. And it's not just the FBI and the White House colluding with Stanford or and Twitter and Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg and TikTok. it's also these fact check organizations, right? So Facebook likes to say we have a third party fact checking organization, in which they've labeled almost everything I've said about COVID on Facebook as disinformation, and they put a label on it. So now all my friends in Hollywood think I'm some kind of a crazy. But if you look into those fact checking organizations, they're all funded by a billionaire or like Bill Gates with a political agenda, or a big pharma company like the Johnson & Johnson Foundation. These are not fact-checking organizations. These are organizations with a political agenda, and they've never found one fact I've ever gotten wrong, but they do write articles saying that I'm being misleading, even though my facts are 100% correct. So that's a big part of the what is it okay if I call it a rally on September 29th?
Yeah.
Sure. It's actually part of two of our pillars. There's the censorship industrial complex, which contains not only the elimination of the right to speak of people, but also the control of information, in which things are claimed to be factual or claimed to be false for no reason. But this also is connected to the academic industrial complex, in which institutions that were once dedicated to fearless truth-seeking have now been so politicized that they will actually make claims that experts in the field should full well know are false. For example, that men can simply become women. And we need institutions that are capable of doing scientific work and establishing things to the best of their ability, irrespective of whether or not that favors the powerful or it doesn't. So anyway, this is core to our mission.
Well, I have to push back a little. Not only can men become women, but they become much better women. I don't know if you watch boxing in the Olympics, but
they win awards.
Yeah, they win awards. They're setting track records and swim records. They're much better women than the women that I knew. But anyway, so this freedom of speech, here's the thing. Many people, it's like you have to keep teaching people the same lesson. Freedom of speech isn't there for speech we all like. Freedom of speech is there for speech that may be abhorrent to us. Maybe that's even me, like speech that I can't stand and hate. When I grew up in Chicago, the Nazis used to march through Skokie, which is a big Jewish neighborhood, and they were trying to provoke people. And of course, the ACLU would go to court for their right to free speech, and they were allowed to march, right? And we looked at that as a celebration of the United States free speech and First Amendment rights, and we didn't see that as a negative. We could go and counter-protest them. So today we find a very similar thing, but the people who you think would be for freedom of speech are now against. The Democrats. I was a Democrat my whole life up until 2016, and the Democrats they're all for censorship. They call it content moderation. That's what Don Lemon said to Elon Musk, content moderation, which is just called censoring people. And now you see on college campuses, you see Democrats trying to suppress even whether you agree with the people who are pro-Palestine protesters or not. They should have a right to speak, correct? What do you? I mean, that's a blanket thing. Even if you are, you think they're terrorists or you think they're what do you say to that?
Well, I would.
Everybody has a right to free speech. Go ahead, Bret.
Yes, it's very simple and laid out eloquently in our founding documents. And I would point out that one of the things that makes the Republic so special is that the founders were very careful to protect counterintuitive principles. It's what makes the place run. Why should people who say abhorrent things have the right to say them? Because there is no other way to protect things that are not yet commonplace and embraced that need to be said. You have to protect speech that is abhorrent in order to protect the speech that you most need. And this touches on another one of our pillars, a rejection of so-called lawfare. The fact is, the founders were understandably terrified of egregious governmental overreach. And so what they did is they actually hobbled the state in court. why should the state be hobbled? When you're arrested, why should the state face such a tremendous burden in prosecuting you? Because if they don't have that tremendous burden, the advantages that they have will be abused, which is exactly what we are seeing. So just as you have seen the inversion of the Democratic Party, to which you and I are and we're both members, this is the inversion of the values that our society is rightly based on.
Well, I even say in my act that I've stayed the same. It's the Democrat. I didn't leave the Democratic Party. They left me. I've always been for bodily autonomy. They're not anymore. They're for mandating experimental medical treatments, which is the opposite of bodily autonomy. Now that's why they say they're not pro-choice anymore. Many of them say they're pro-abortion, which that's a shocking term to me. I was always pro-choice. I was always for keeping the government out from in between a doctor and a patient. But to be pro-abortion, to me, it sounds like, I'm pro-amputation. It's like, let's all celebrate that somebody got. No, it's like, anyway. They talk about abortion like it's Christmas. It's crazy. But I've always been for bodily autonomy. I've always been for anti-war peace. I've always been for free speech. And now, if you're for those things, they call you a right-winger. Like if I was against the Ukraine war and I called a right-winger or a Putin puppet, I'm for bodily autonomy. They call me a right-winger and an anti-vaxxer. And I'm for free speech. They did the same thing. They call me a right-winger. You're a free speech absolutist. Yes, I've never heard that term before, but yes, I certainly am. So that's the weird thing, that the Democratic Party is now morphed into being the party of the George Bush, Dick Cheney Republicans, and it's
absolutely.
And this is kind of a response to that, right? Because there's nobody left to kind of fight for these things in government.
I think what we've seen is kind of like how you've described the Democrats left you. And I think this also is a little bit related to the reactions and the language around the January 6th riots. That they have a very intense reverence for these institutions. And it doesn't matter where the institutions take things, mandating medical treatments, criminalizing certain types of speech, weaponizing the judicial system. That's what the institution does, and they worship at its altar. And so we're trying to level set and say, like, these it's like it's an umbrella of industrial complexes. And it's taken over these institutions, and we cannot worship institution. We need to stand and recenter ourselves around the pillars of the things that make the broader Western civilization, the Republic, great. The things that we love about the West, not the things that we hate.
So I find it shockingly bizarre that the mainstream news media for 4 years while Trump was president, and now they're saying it again, is saying that he's going to prosecute his political opponents and he's going to use the justice system and weaponize it against his political opponents, even though he didn't. He was president for 4 years and he never locked up Hillary Clinton or did any of that stuff. And then as soon as he loses the election in 2020, they immediately start prosecuting him, and they're doing it on and so I had Cornel West on my show. And I tried to point out to him that they use the same RICO statute, which is supposed to be for the mafia. That's why everybody was okay with it. It's supposed to just be used against the mafia. They use the same RICO statute and the same grand jury to prosecute Donald Trump as they did to prosecute Stop Cop City protesters, which people protesting the expansion of the police state. And when I said that to Cornel West, he said, I look like I like Trump more than I'm letting on. Like he pretended that he couldn't see the connection between what was happening. And what's happening is that the establishment, not just in the United States, but the billionaire class that run the Western world, if you go against them, they will immediately throw you in prison now and use lawfare against you. They did it to Imran Khan in Pakistan. He came out and said, the people of Pakistan don't want to go along with NATO's wars. We want peace. He's in jail now. Okay, then they did it to Lulu in Brazil, and so then they thought the center-right guy, they put Lulu in prison, right? He was running for president, and they thought the center-right guy was going to win, but then the far-right guy, Bolsonaro, won, and they're like, oh, what do we do? So the only way they could fix that was they had to let Lulu back out of prison because he's the only... Lula, right? Lula, I say Lulu? Lula, back out of prison because he's the only one who could beat Bolsonaro. And then as soon as he beats him, Bolsonaro, they criminalize him and make him, he can never be able to run again for president. And now they're doing the same thing to Donald Trump. And I tried to make the case to Cornel West that if they can do this to a former president of the United States right out in the open, they'll do it to anybody who, well, they did it to Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, and they'll do it to Cornel West if he ever becomes a threat to the establishment, or Bernie Sanders, or anybody that does that. And that's what is, and they're doing it right out in the open, and everybody seems to pretend it's not happening. They're still saying that Donald Trump is the one who's going to do it. Even, isn't that kind of mind-blowing?
Yes,
like
they're utterly
quote.
shameless.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Angela.
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, they're utterly shameless. It's like what is the 1984 quote? The party told you what
to ignore
what to
the
see
evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final and most essential command.
There you go. We're living it right now. I mean, we're trying to not live it, but there are millions of people out there who are living it, and we want to help them wake up, and we want to give them a place to go to, and values to reference that are outside of strictly party politics. What we're pushing, I'd like to say, is a real unity movement where dissident left, dissident right, libertarians, independents can all come together and say, we love free speech. We love these values. We want to usher in a return to truth-seeking and open dialogue. We reject lawfare and weaponization of the judicial system.
You know what was...
And I would add...
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would add that we are providing a venue where that unity movement can come together, but we also need people to show up because, let's be frank, an entity as powerful as we are faced with that is willing to cheat on every front that we can see cannot be trusted to leave the election free and fair. So if we are to retake and rescue the republic, we need to win this election by a decisive enough margin to overcome the capacity to cheat. It needs to become clear how many of us there are, how much we agree on, and that we understand the severity of the threat. So the way to do that is to show up in Washington between the Washington Monument and the World War II Memorial on September 29th and lend us your voice.
So the thing that was most encouraging to me was when Bobby Kennedy dropped out of the race and he endorsed Donald Trump, and he went to a rally, a Trump rally in Arizona, and it was a stadium full of people. And I had just come from a stadium full of people in Chicago who were cheering on corruption and more war. And it made me, depressed. And so when I watched Bobby give that speech at Trump's rally, and he was talking about ending the war and investing that money back here, and people cheered. And he was talking about environmentalism, and people cheered. He was talking about getting the poison out of our food system, and people cheered. He was talking about taking on big agra, and people cheered. He was talking about getting the corruption out of the corporate captured regulatory agencies, and people cheered. I'm like, that's all stuff that I could cheer for. And that's happening. So whether you believe that Donald Trump is sincere or not about those things, the thing that's encouraging was that there was a stadium full of Republican presidential voters who were cheering on the same things I would cheer on. And that just goes to show you that the establishment wants us divided, right? And that's why they want us to always be suspicious of our neighbor. Our neighbor's a white supremacist or a Nazi or a communist, and you got to be. They are fomenting the division in this country. But it was something like that made me realize that we have way more in common that divides us. We all agree on so many things, and I'll join with anybody, as Frederick Douglass said, I'll join with anyone to do good and no one to do bad. So if they are serious about doing those things, I'll join with them, and I'll join with that stadium full of people to do those things. Unfortunately, I never hear anything ever coming out of the Democratic Party that when was the last time you heard a Democrat talk about the captured regulatory agencies? When was the last time you heard a Democrat say we have to end the wars? They talk about starting them and funding them and standing up and having the most lethal force. It's the craziest thing. So is that what Bret, you as a former Democrat, was that encouraging to you to see?
Oh my goodness, it was beautiful. The embrace of Kennedy by these people who you would not imagine were Kennedy Democrats, it really sent the message. And I think for all of those of us who have ventured into this unity space, it's hard to convey how good it feels to be among people who are ready to partner for this most important mission. It really feels good to not be petty about ideology and to recognize that we have a shared purpose, and it doesn't, this really is the inclusive movement that the Democratic Party pretends to be. The Democratic Party has actually now become the party of racism. If you want to feel that inclusive thing, it's in this unity movement, which, yes, contains MAGA, right? It's not synonymous with MAGA, but MAGA is there. And as you saw, those people cheering on Bobby Kennedy, that's what it feels like to be amongst people with a shared purpose.
Absolutely. I think, Jimmy, you were present at really like one of the origin stories of this broader unity movement at the first Rage Against the War Machine rally, which was a coming together of the dissident left and libertarians and independents. And, I viewed my job as chair of the National Libertarian Party as to continue that and to grow it. And so, I want to see those relationships included in this movement, and for us to continue to be sort of the guide rails on individual liberties and safeguarding of that. We're having another Rage Against the War Machine rally, by the way, the day before Rescue the Republic in the same spot. So we encourage everybody to just come on out for rally weekend. It's going to be an epic weekend of events in Washington, D.C.
So I remember Rage Against the War Machine. It was a great time. It was great to be around people who were united, even though we have political differences against war, especially. What was interesting to me is the people whose whole life is about being anti-war, who didn't show up at that. And I'm speaking about Code Pink. And it was really interesting because they disagreed with some of the speakers on stage and some of their other political beliefs, whether it be about LGBTQ or something else. They said, we can't participate because we don't agree with them. And it's like, well, that's the whole point of, that's what gives it power, when you can unite with people you disagree with politically, you knuckleheads. It's like, oh, I want to stop a nuclear war, but not with those people. It's like, it's the craziest thing.
I would say, I know that the People's Party and some of the people, the thought leaders on the dissident left, took a lot of flack for organizing and working with me, the Libertarian Party, especially the Mises Caucus Libertarian Party. I want to extend the invitation again. I don't care what you think of me. I don't care if you think I'm an evil, whatever. Like, I genuinely, I believe in the anti-war effort and movement. Members of Code Pink, Medea Benjamin especially, who I think is a total doll and does an amazing job confronting some of these scumbag operatives in the deep state. Like, come out. Even if you don't want to speak, if you don't want to have an official presence, come out. Like, we want you there, and we love and value the work that you do, just like everybody else who's on the left pushing for the anti-war solution. We want people who believe in peace at our events on Saturday and on Sunday. If you think Sunday might sound a little too right wing, like, we've got Russell Brand, we've got left wingers there, because this is for everyone. This is like, you belong.
Yeah, I consider myself on the left. Always, like I said, I haven't changed. I've always been for Medicare for all. I've been for freedom of speech, bodily autonomy, anti-racism. I'm sure there's a couple of things I'm leaving out, but I've been consistent and I haven't changed.
Sounds very right wing.
And now I'm considered right wing. It's funny. Well, I really anything else you'd like to add before I say goodbye?
Donate to help us take care of this event. It's a ton of work. Bret and I have worked nonstop, but it's just incredibly rewarding work. Bret?
Yeah, it's very rewarding, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this large gathering of this most important movement. And as Angela said, everybody is welcome. If you look at our pillars and you resonate with them, which if you're a patriot, you almost certainly will. There's nothing you will disagree with on that list. If you look at that list, this is your gathering and you should come to it. The only people who shouldn't come to it are people who are interested in rigging the system or people who are interested in breaking the law or violence or bigotry. Those people are not welcome. Everybody else is, and I think they'll be very glad that they showed up.
I did a show in May in Los Angeles at the Zephyr Theater, and it was a live video show. And anyway, I have a broad audience, and so I had some MAGA people sitting in the front, and I had some socialists, Marxists, as they self-described. And I know they were Marxists because the guy handed me 2 books on his way out. They always travel with books. And they were having kind of an argument because it's a raucous event at our shows, and they were kind of yelling at each other and arguing. And then the Marxists went and got into the MAGA guy's face. And I was like, oh, no, this is going to get violent. And the next thing I know, they were hugging. So I guess maybe they were talking about the Federal Reserve, and they agreed. And anyway, so that's kind of the message of my show, that we have a common enemy, and that enemy is the oligarchy,
Yes.
and it's not each other, but they want us to turn on each other. And I think we need more events like this to happen. We need to take back our government. And give it back to the people, because it's in the hands of a handful of donors. I mean, right now the Democratic Party is running the most unpopular person ever to run for president, and was the most unpopular vice president. She couldn't get a vote when she ran in 2020, but she was the darling and the first choice of the donor class. They anointed her on Martha's Vineyard, and then she went to the primary and couldn't get a vote, and then they forced her on Joe Biden, made her the vice president, most unpopular vice president in history. Even Jimmy Kimmel said that. And now we're supposed to believe she's the most popular candidate in the race. I don't believe it. And nobody seemed, when I was at the Democratic convention, nobody seemed to mind that they threw out 14 million votes for Joe Biden, and nobody voted for her. It's the weirdest. And who chose her? The donor class. And who's that? That's the military-industrial complex and Wall Street, big oil. I mean, it's the people we're supposed to be fighting against as Democrats, and they just installed her as a puppet. And I think the transformation of the Democratic Party into the party of George Bush, Dick Cheney is complete,
Yes.
except they have a gay pride flag. That's the only difference.
Window dressing.
Yeah, it's all window dressing, and you don't have to be a supporter of I don't endorse Donald Trump for president, but like I said, when I saw that speech that Bobby gave at his rally, I will help to work for all those things, right? So you don't have to be someone endorsing Donald Trump to endorse these things. I think these are just common sense things that we all have to get behind. War is always the last resort. How about that? End lawfare and abuse. Sanctify, recodify, informed consent. Secure the monetary freedom. I'm a big crypto person. I think that we got to watch out for digital IDs, and the centralized digital currency is not a good idea. So all those things I think are fantastic. I think anybody who's these are like common sense proposals. I, as a lefty, can endorse all of them, and so that's why I'm going to be part of this. And I just want to say thanks for setting this up, and thanks for inviting me, and thanks for your leadership, both of you, on this. And I appreciate you coming on to tell us about it.
Thanks. Let's begin rescuing the Republic on September 29th.
And what is the website people should go to?
It's jointheresistance.org.
Okay, Join the Resistance. I think it's okay, jointheresistance.org. Okay, everybody check that out. All right, Angela, Bret, I appreciate it. We'll talk to you both soon.
Looking forward to seeing you, Jimmy.
Okay, bye-bye. Hey, come see us on tour. We'll be in Duluth, Georgia, Jacksonville, Florida, Los Angeles, Tempe, Arizona, and Burbank, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for those tickets.